What is the price of a person's dignity? For Isabella, pregnant and deeply in love, she thought it was enduring the quiet scorn of her husband's wealthy family. She was wrong. The true price was to be paid tonight in the most exclusive restaurant in the city, under the glare of 100 judgmental eyes. She was about to be branded a gold digger, a fraud, and a disgrace. They would try to break her, to strip her of her husband, her future, and her self-respect. They almost succeeded, but they made one catastrophic mistake they never thought to ask about her father. They were about to find out that while some people buy dinner, others buy the entire building. The air in Aurelia, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign, was thick with the scent of money and truffle oil. Crystal glasses, thin as a whisper, chimed softly, a delicate counterpoint to the low hum of conversations about stock prices and summering in the Hamptons. For Isabella, every shimmering surface felt like a mirror, reflecting her own inadequacy. She smoothed a hand over the gentle swell of her 6-month pregnant belly, the soft silk of her emerald green maternity dress, a small comfort against her rising anxiety. This dinner was supposed to be a celebration. Her husband, Marcus Sterling, had just been named a junior partner at his father's prestigious law firm, Sterling & Locke. It was a monumental achievement, a moment Isabella wanted to cherish. But celebrating with the Sterlings was never simple. It was a performance, and she always felt like she was forgetting her lines. Across the table, her mother-in-law, Beatrice Sterling, sat enthroned in a high-backed velvet chair. Her silver hair was coiffed into a severe architectural style that defied gravity and warmth in equal measure. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, scanned Isabella's dress with a faint, almost imperceptible curl of her lip. Emerald Beatrice commented, her voice as crisp as a freshly minted dollar bill. "A bold choice for your condition." Isabella forced a smile. "I thought it was cheerful." "It's certainly visible," Beatrice replied before turning her laser-like attention to her son. "Marcus, darling, you look tired. You must tell me, is Isabella keeping you up at nights with all those strange cravings she must be having?" Marcus, handsome and impeccably dressed in a Tom Ford suit, shifted uncomfortably. "Mum, please. Izzy's been wonderful. We're both just excited." He reached across the table and squeezed Isabella's hand, but his grip felt more like a nervous tick than a gesture of support. He loved her. She knew he did. They had met in a library, a quiet, unassuming romance that felt a world away from this gilded cage. He was the gentle soul of a ruthless family, and she often felt he was as much a victim of their expectations as she was. The real viper at the table, however, arrived fashionably late. "Marcus, darling." "Beatrice." "I am so dreadfully sorry." Chloe Vanderwood glided towards their table, a vision in crimson silk that clung to her impossibly perfect figure. Chloe was Marcus's ex-girlfriend from college, a woman born and bred in the same rarefied world as the Sterlings. She had a face like a porcelain doll, and a heart Isabella suspected like a shard of glass. Their breakup had been Marcus's one great act of rebellion, and Beatrice had never forgiven him for it. Chloe remained a dear family friend, a constant glittering reminder of the wife Isabella was not. "Chloe, you made it." Beatrice's face lit up with a genuine warmth Isabella had never received. "You look simply divine, doesn't she, Marcus?" Marcus stood politely. "Chloe, good to see you." Chloe air-kissed him, her expensive perfume, Chanel No. 5, enveloping him in a cloud of their shared past. Her eyes flickered to Isabella's stomach, and then back to her face, a perfectly manicured eyebrow raised in faux surprise. "Oh, Isabella. There you are. I almost didn't see you behind that glorious baby bump. You are simply glowing. It's so wonderfully rustic." The word hung in the air, rustic. It was how they saw her. The daughter of a simple middle-class family. The librarian who had somehow trapped their golden boy. The rustic common soil from which the next sterling heir would regrettably spring. Isabella's hand instinctively tightened on her belly. "It's lovely to see you too, Chloe," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. The waiter, a stern-looking man named Mr. Dubois, with a comically French accent, fawned over Chloe, pulling out her chair and complimenting her dress. He barely glanced at Isabella. As the appetizers arrived, oysters and caviar that Isabella couldn't eat, the conversation turned to topics designed to exclude her. They discussed the upcoming charity gala at the Met, reminisced about sailing trips in Monaco, and debated the merits of various Swiss boarding schools for the future generation. Isabella sat in silence, a ghost at the feast. She tried to catch Marcus's eye to send a silent plea for help, but he was deep in conversation with Chloe about a mutual acquaintance who had just bought a vineyard in Napa. They laughed at a shared memory, and for a moment they looked like the perfect couple everyone had always expected them to be. A cold dread, heavier than any third trimester fatigue, began to settle in Isabella's bones. This wasn't just a celebration, it was a trial. And she was the one being judged. The main course arrived on plates so large they seemed to dwarf the exquisitely arranged portions of food. Isabella had ordered the pan-seared sea bass, a safe, simple choice. Chloe, of course, had ordered the Wagyu beef, describing her preference for its preparation with an authority that suggested she personally knew the cow. "You know," Chloe began, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "I was just speaking with my father's broker the other day. He was mentioning how volatile the market is for young families trying to buy property in the city. It's a complete nightmare." She looked at Isabella with a gaze full of pity. "You and Marcus must be so stressed looking for a place that's suitable. And with the baby on the way." Before Isabella could reply that they had already found a lovely brownstone they were closing on, Beatrice interjected. "Oh, we're handling it, Chloe, dear. We can't have my first grandchild raised in some dreadful walk-up. The Sterling name requires a certain standard after all." She took a delicate sip of her Chardonnay. "My son has his new partnership to focus on. The domestic details are being managed." The implication was clear. Isabella was a domestic detail, and a poorly managed one at that. "Of course," Chloe said, her voice laced with honeyed venom. "Marcus has always needed someone to look after the practical side of things. He's more of a dreamer, an idealist." She smiled at Isabella. "That's what you must love about him, his artistic soul." It was a masterclass in condescension. In one breath, she had complimented Marcus while simultaneously infantilizing him and framing Isabella as the simple woman charmed by his unworldliness, completely incapable of understanding the practical side of things. Isabella felt Marcus's knee brush against hers under the table. It was a small apologetic gesture, but it wasn't enough. She wanted him to speak up to say Isabella is perfectly capable or we're a team. But he remained silent, a pained expression on his face as he cut into his steak. His silence was a betrayal, a small cut that stung more than any of Chloe's barbs. Isabella decided she wouldn't be a silent victim. She squared her shoulders, the baby inside her, giving a little flutter as if in encouragement. "Actually, Chloe," she said, her voice calm and clear, Marcus and I have been handling the house hunting together. We found a wonderful place on the Upper West Side. It has a garden. We thought it would be perfect for the baby." Beatrice set her wine glass down with a sharp click. "The Upper West Side, Marcus. You didn't tell me you were looking there. I thought we agreed on the East Side closer to the club." "It was Isabella's choice, Mother." Marcus mumbled, finally looking up from his plate. She loved the neighborhood feel. The neighborhood feel, Chloe laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on Isabella's nerves. "Oh, that's darling. It's all strollers and organic markets over there. So very wholesome." The atmosphere grew colder. Isabella felt the eyes of nearby diners on them. The Sterlings were restaurant royalty in this part of town, and their table was the evening's theatre. The final calculated blow of the evening's first act came from Chloe. As she reached for the wine bottle to refill her glass, she swung her arm out in a wide, theatrical arc, knocking her full glass of deep, blood-red Cabernet directly onto the lap of Isabella's emerald dress. "Oh, my heavens!" Chloe shrieked, jumping back. "Isabella. I am so sorry. I'm just so clumsy." The cold, wet shock of the wine was instantaneous, seeping through the silk and onto her skin. A dark, ugly stain spread across her belly, a violent splash of crimson on the serene green. Gasps rippled from the tables around them. It was a spectacle. "Goodness gracious, Beatrice," said her voice dripping with annoyance rather than concern. "What a mess. Mr. Dubois." The manager materialized instantly, his face a mask of horrified concern directed entirely at Chloe. "Madame Vanderwood, are you all right? Let me get you some club soda at once." "I'm fine." "I'm fine," Chloe said, waving him off while dabbing at Isabella's dress with her own napkin, making the stain worse. "It's Isabella's beautiful dress that's ruined. You poor thing. And a maternity dress, too. Those must be so hard to replace." Isabella sat frozen, the wet, sticky fabric clinging to her. She looked at Marcus, her eyes pleading. This was it. This was the moment for him to stand up, to see the malice for what it was, to defend her. Marcus stood, flustered. "It's okay, Izzy. It was an accident. We can get it cleaned. Mr. Dubois. Could we get some towels, please? An accident." He called it an accident. He didn't see the glint of triumph in Chloe's eyes. He didn't hear the dismissal in his mother's voice. He just saw a mess to be cleaned up, a social inconvenience to be smoothed over. The crack in Isabella's heart widened into a chasm. She wasn't just an outsider. She was a prop in their drama, a convenient target for their cruelty. And her husband, the man who had promised to love and protect her, was letting it all happen. The spill was the turning point. The pretense of civility dissolved, and the humiliation began in earnest. As Isabella sat there, soaked and shivering, Mr. Dubois returned with a junior waiter, who handed her a stack of coarse, starchy napkins. There was no offer to move to a more private area, no genuine apology for the disruption. The message was clear. She was the disruption. "Perhaps you should go to the ladies' room and try to sort yourself out, dear," Beatrice suggested, waving a dismissive hand. "You're creating a bit of a scene." Isabella's blood ran cold. She was creating a scene. "I think I'm fine, right here." "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. She would not be dismissed like a naughty child. Chloe, seizing the opportunity, leaned forward, her face a mask of concern. "Beatrice is right, Isabella. You look terribly flushed. The stress of it all can't be good for the baby." Her words were aimed at Isabella, but her eyes were locked on Marcus. Honestly, Marcus, maybe this sort of environment is just too much for her right now. It's all so overwhelming when you're not used to it. The phrase "not used to it" was a dagger. It was the core of their entire argument against her. She wasn't one of them. She didn't belong. The humiliation was no longer just about a spilled drink. It had become a public referendum on her marriage. The murmurs from the surrounding tables grew louder. Isabella could feel the weight of their stares, their pity, their judgment. She was the pregnant girl in the stained dress, the outsider at the Sterling table. This was when Beatrice decided to deliver the killing blow. She placed her fork and knife down with surgical precision and looked directly at Isabella. Her voice, though low, carried through the suddenly hushed restaurant. "You know, Marcus and I have been meaning to have a serious conversation about the future, about this situation." "Mother not here?" Marcus hissed, his face pale. "Yes, here," Beatrice said, her voice like ice. "Here and now. I have watched you, Isabella. I have watched you since my son made the regrettable decision to bring you into our family. I have seen how you operate. This pregnancy, it was all very sudden, wasn't it? Very convenient, just as Marcus was on the cusp of his partnership." Isabella felt the air leave her lungs. "What are you implying?" She whispered, her hands instinctively, clutching her stomach, a protective shield for her unborn child. "I'm not implying anything. I am stating a fact," Beatrice declared, her voice rising in volume and righteousness. "You trapped my son. You saw the Sterling name, the Sterling fortune, and you saw your ticket out of whatever provincial life you came from. And I, for one, have serious doubts that this baby is even his." A collective audible gasp swept through the restaurant. The words, so vile and so public, hung in the air like poison. Isabella felt as if she had been physically struck. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and shameful, blurring the faces of her tormentors into cruel caricatures. She looked at Marcus. This was it. The ultimate line had been crossed. There was no more room for excuses or placating. He had to choose. Marcus stared at his mother, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He was horrified, she could see that. But he was also terrified. He looked from his mother's stony face to Isabella's tear-streaked one, his expression a mess of conflict and weakness. "Mother, that's a monstrous thing to say," he stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. It was a protest, not a roar. Chloe jumped in, playing the role of the reasonable mediator. "Beatrice, perhaps that's going too far. But you can't blame a mother for being protective. The timing is suspicious. All we're saying, Isabella, is that a paternity test would clear this all up and put everyone's mind at ease. For the good of the family." Isabella stared at them, her heart shattering into a million pieces. They were a pack of wolves tearing her apart, and her husband was just standing by watching. "I've had enough," Isabella said, her voice thick with tears but imbued with a sudden final strength. She pushed her chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the marble floor. "I'm leaving." "Good," Beatrice sneered. "Go, and don't think you'll be taking a single sterling dollar with you. I don't want your money." Isabella sobbed, grabbing her purse. Suddenly, Mr. Dubois was at her side, his posture stiff and menacing. "Ma'am, I believe it would be best if you left. You are disturbing our other patrons." "I'm the one being disturbed," Isabella cried, her control finally breaking. "Please, ma'am." "Don't make this more unpleasant than it needs to be," the manager said coldly. He gestured subtly, and from the corner of her eye, Isabella saw two large security guards in black suits begin to move toward their table. They were going to have her thrown out. Her husband's family was publicly accusing her of being a lying, cheating gold digger, and the establishment was siding with them. She looked at Marcus one last time, a final desperate plea. He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. He just ran a hand through his hair and said, his voice barely a whisper, "Izzy, maybe we should just go. Please, don't make a scene." That was it. The final betrayal. He wasn't with her. He was with them. In that moment, Isabella felt a profound and terrifying loneliness. She was completely, utterly alone. She braced herself for the humiliation of being escorted out like a common criminal. The security guards were 2 steps away when a calm, quiet voice cut through the tension. "I don't think that will be necessary." The voice was not loud, but it had a quality of absolute authority that made everyone, including the guards, freeze in their tracks. A man was standing by their table. He was in his late 50s, dressed in a simple, impeccably tailored grey suit with no tie. He had kind eyes, but they were currently surveying the scene with a chillingly placid demeanor. He was unassuming, yet he commanded the room's entire attention. Beatrice scoffed. "And who are you?" "More of her trashy family, I presume." Isabella looked up, and through her tears, she whispered a single word. "Dad." His name was Stephen Ardley. To Isabella, he was just Dad, the man who taught her how to ride a bike, who read her bedtime stories, and who always told her that her real value was in her mind, and her kindness not in a bank account. He ran a small, successful construction business back in Ohio, or so she had always believed. He had always been a private, humble man, preferring a well-worn flannel shirt to a suit. Seeing him here in the heart of Manhattan's elite dining scene was a shock. "Dad, what are you doing here?" she asked. Her voice choked with a mixture of relief and confusion. Stephen's gaze softened as he looked at his daughter. He gently took a napkin from the table, bypassing the wine-soaked area, and dabbed at her tear-streaked cheeks. "I was in town for a meeting. I wanted to surprise you. It seems I've arrived just in time." His eyes then moved from Isabella to the 3 people who had been tormenting her, and the softness vanished, replaced by a gaze as hard and unyielding as granite. "Mr. Dubois." The manager puffed out his chest, annoyed by this new interruption. "Sir, this is a private family matter. I must ask you to leave." "Security." Stephen Ardley didn't even turn to look at him. He kept his eyes locked on Beatrice. "A private family matter that you've allowed to become a public spectacle. Interesting management style." "How dare you?" Beatrice snapped, incensed. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I know exactly who you are, Mrs. Sterling." Stephen said, his voice level. "You're the mother of the man who married my daughter, and you're a guest in my restaurant." A confused silence fell over the table. Chloe let out a disbelieving little laugh. "Your restaurant? Don't be ridiculous. This is Aurelia. It's owned by the Gallant Group. Everyone knows that." Stephen finally turned his head slowly to face Mr. Dubois. "Mr. Dubois, is it? Your name is on the plaque by the entrance." "It is," the manager said stiffly. "And you are trespassing." "Am I?" Stephen reached into the inner pocket of his grey suit jacket. He didn't pull out a weapon or a wallet. He pulled out a simple folded set of legal documents and a slim, high-end smartphone. "I'm afraid you're working with outdated information. The Gallant Group accepted a rather generous offer and finalized the sale of this building and the 3 adjacent properties last Tuesday. The new owner is a private real estate investment firm, Ardley Holdings." He placed the documents on the table. It was the deed, the official notarized city-registered deed to the property at 215 Park Avenue. His name, Stephen Ardley, was clearly visible as the sole signatory for the purchasing company. He then tapped his phone, and an email thread appeared on the screen. He held it up for Mr. Dubois to see. The subject line read, "Management Transition and Performance Review, 215 Park Avenue." Mr. Dubois's face went from smugly indignant to a pasty, sickly white. The color drained from his cheeks as if a plug had been pulled. He stared at the deed, then at the phone, then at the unassuming man in the simple grey suit. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The air of arrogant authority he had worn like a second skin evaporated, leaving behind a terrified, suddenly small man. Ardley. Holdings. Beatrice stammered the name, clearly meaning nothing to her. She operated in the world of old money and law. She didn't pay attention to the titans of commercial real estate who reshaped the city's skyline from quiet, anonymous offices. Chloe, however, was a creature of the modern world of finance and influence. Her phone was already in her hand, her thumbs flying across the screen. Her perfectly made-up face contorted in horror as the search results loaded. Ardley Holdings wasn't just a firm, it was a leviathan. They owned billions in assets across North America and Europe. Stephen Ardley wasn't just a CEO. He was a ghost, a legend in the industry, known for his silent, aggressive acquisitions and his complete aversion to the press. He was a billionaire many times over a man who could buy and sell families like the Sterlings before breakfast, and not even remember doing it by lunch. "Oh my God," Chloe breathed, looking at the humble man from Ohio, as if she were seeing a deity. The entire restaurant was silent now, watching the drama unfold. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been annihilated and rebuilt from the ground up in the span of 30 seconds. Stephen Ardley turned his attention back to his daughter, his expression once again gentle. "Isabella, honey, why don't you sit down? It seems we have a few things to discuss with your in-laws." He pulled out a chair for her, and she sank into it, her mind reeling. Her father, the man who fixed leaky faucets and loved to grill in the backyard, owned this entire building. Her entire understanding of her life, her family, was tilting on its axis. Then Stephen's cool, calculating eyes settled on Marcus. The look wasn't one of anger. It was something far worse, profound, absolute disappointment. "And you," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You are Marcus, I presume. We have a lot to talk about." The stillness in the restaurant was absolute. Diners were no longer pretending not to listen. They were openly staring phones, discreetly pointed towards the Sterling table, capturing a socialite drama that would be gossip gold for weeks. Stephen Ardley began the dismantling of his daughter's tormentors with a quiet, methodical precision that was far more terrifying than any shouting match could ever be. He started with the lowest on the food chain. "Mr. Dubois," he said, not even glancing at the manager, who was now sweating profusely through his starched shirt. "You allowed a pregnant woman, a customer in this establishment, to be verbally abused, publicly shamed, and physically threatened by your security staff. You did this to curry favor with what you perceived to be the more important patrons. This tells me you have no integrity, no decency, and a catastrophic lack of judgment. Please gather your personal effects from your office. You are no longer employed by any entity under the umbrella of Ardley Holdings. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you." Mr. Dubois looked as though he'd been shot. But, sir, please, There is nothing to discuss, Stephen said, his voice final. He then scanned the room, and his eyes landed on a young waitress who had earlier in the evening discreetly brought Isabella a glass of water and a kind, sympathetic smile when no one was looking. "You," he said, pointing to her, "what's your name?" The young woman froze, terrified. "Maria, sir," Maria, Stephen said with a warm smile. "Congratulations on your promotion to restaurant manager. We'll discuss your salary and training tomorrow. For now, please bring my daughter a warm, dry towel and a glass of sparkling apple cider, and please have these people's—" He gestured vaguely at Beatrice and Chloe bill sent to my table, "which you can set up for me over there in the quiet corner." Maria, stunned but intelligent, simply nodded. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." She scurried off, her entire life having just changed. Next, Stephen turned his gaze to Chloe Vanderwood. She had composed herself, trying to salvage the situation with a sycophantic smile. "Mr. Ardley, this is all just a terrible misunderstanding. I've known Marcus for years. We're old family." "Miss Vanderwood." Stephen interrupted, his tone chillingly polite. "My people are very thorough. When my daughter told me she was marrying a Sterling, I naturally had a comprehensive background analysis done on the entire family and their associates. It's just prudent business." Chloe's smile faltered. "I know, for instance," Stephen continued, his voice dropping slightly, "that your father's import-export business is leveraged to the hilt with 3 separate loans, 2 of which are from banks my company happens to hold a majority stake in. I know that your lifestyle brand is burning through cash and has been insolvent for 6 months. And I know that the down payment for your ridiculously overpriced condo came not from your trust fund, which was depleted long ago, but from a personal gift from a married Swiss industrialist named Jean-Luc Fournier." Every word was a perfectly aimed shot. Chloe's face went from pale to ashen. She looked like she might faint. The mention of Jean-Luc was the kill shot. It was a deeply buried secret that would ruin her. "I would advise you," Stephen said softly, "to finish your drink and leave. Quietly. I would also advise you to never speak to or about my daughter or my grandchild ever again. Am I understood?" Unable to speak, Chloe just nodded frantically, her eyes wide with terror. She grabbed her purse, shot a venomous, desperate look at Beatrice, and practically fled from the restaurant, leaving a faint trail of Chanel No. 5 in her wake. Now only 2 were left: Beatrice and Marcus. Stephen pulled up a chair and sat down directly opposite Beatrice. He was no longer a CEO dismantling a problem. He was a father. "Mrs. Sterling," he began, and the restaurant was so quiet that the clinking of ice in a water glass from the bar sounded like a gunshot. "For months you have treated my daughter like dirt beneath your feet. You judged her based on her background, her clothes, her supposed lack of wealth. You did all this without having the slightest clue who she is or where she comes from. You saw a librarian and assumed she was simple. You saw kindness and assumed it was weakness." He leaned forward slightly. "Let me tell you who my daughter is. She's a summa cum laude graduate in classical literature. She speaks 3 languages. She volunteered for 2 years building schools in Guatemala. She is kinder, smarter, and has more integrity in her little finger than you have displayed in your entire life. The greatest fortune she possesses is not the one she will one day inherit from me, but the one that resides in her heart. And you, in your blind, pathetic snobbery, were incapable of seeing it." Beatrice was speechless. her face a mask of horrified disbelief and utter humiliation. "You publicly questioned her honor." Stephen continued, his voice low and intense. "You publicly questioned my grandchild's paternity. You did this to the mother of your son's child. There is no apology that can fix that. There is no sum of money that can undo it. You have shown your true character, and now I will show you mine." He turned his eyes, now full of cold fire, to the last person at the table. His son-in-law, Marcus. The weight of his father-in-law's gaze was immense. Marcus felt like a bug under a microscope. There was no anger in Stephen's eyes, which would have been easier to bear. Instead, there was a profound, piercing disappointment that stripped away every excuse Marcus had ever made for himself. "I liked you, Marcus," Stephen said, his voice deceptively calm. "When Isabella told me about you, she described you as kind, gentle, and intelligent. A good man trapped in a difficult family. I believed her. I gave you my blessing to marry my most precious treasure. I trusted you to protect her." He paused, letting the words hang in the heavy air. "Tonight I saw a boy, not a man. I saw a boy cowering before his mother. I saw a boy who allowed his wife, the pregnant mother of his child, to be systematically humiliated and abused by the two people in the world he should have been shielding her from. You didn't just fail to protect her. You actively participated in her pain through your silence. Your silence was a weapon, and you aimed it directly at her heart." Marcus flinched. Every word was true. He had no defense. I'm sorry," he whispered the words, tasting like ash in his mouth. "I didn't. I froze. You froze." Stephen's voice hardened slightly. "When Chloe accidentally spilled wine on her, you froze. When my daughter was called rustic and common, you froze. When your mother called her a gold digger and questioned the paternity of your own child, you froze. When the manager called security to have her physically thrown out, you froze. It seems to me, Marcus, that you are very good at freezing. What you are not good at is being a husband." Beatrice, finally finding her voice, tried to intervene. "Now see here, you have no right to speak to my son that way." Stephen held up a hand, silencing her, without even looking at her. His focus was entirely on Marcus. "You were presented with a choice tonight, son," Stephen continued. "It's the same choice you've been facing every day since you met my daughter. A choice between the approval of your poisonous mother and the love of your wife. A choice between your family's toxic legacy and the new family you are supposed to be building. And tonight, in front of all these people, you made your choice. You chose them." Isabella, who had been listening in a state of numb shock, finally looked at Marcus. The tears had stopped, replaced by a heart-breaking clarity. Her father was right. Marcus had made his choice. Stephen leaned back in his chair. The reckoning was over. Now came the consequences. So here is the situation as I see it. The personal relationship between the Ardley family and the Sterling family is for all intents and purposes over. However, my daughter is carrying a Sterling grandchild. That complicates things. So I am going to give you one final choice, Marcus. He looked from Marcus to Beatrice and back again. You can walk out of this restaurant with your mother. You can go back to your world of clubs and galas and hollow prestige. You will have her approval. You will retain your partnership at her husband's firm. In exchange, you will sign divorce papers tomorrow morning. You will give Isabella full uncontested custody of the baby. You will be allowed supervised visitation at my daughter's discretion. You will not be a part of my grandchild's life. but you will be free of this uncomfortable conflict you so clearly despise." He let that sink in. Then he presented the alternative. "Or," Stephen said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "you can tell your mother to leave. You can walk out of this restaurant with your wife. You will come with me, and you will spend the rest of your life proving to her and to me that you are the man she thought you were. You will have to earn back her trust piece by painful piece. It will be the hardest work you ever do. Your mother will likely disown you. You will almost certainly lose your new partnership. You will lose the safety net of the Sterling name. You will have to build a life on your own 2 feet, on your own merit." He stood up, his presence filling the room. "The choice is yours, Marcus. Your old life or your new one. You cannot have both." Stephen walked over to Isabella and gently helped her to her feet. He put a protective arm around her. "We will be waiting by the door. You have 5 minutes to decide who you are." With that, Stephen and Isabella walked away from the table, leaving Marcus sitting alone between his furious, humiliated mother and the smoking wreckage of his life. The entire restaurant watched, waiting to see what he would do. It was the longest 5 minutes of Marcus Sterling's life. He looked at his mother's face, twisted with rage and entitlement, and then he looked at his wife's back as she walked away. Her posture radiating a strength he had never seen before, a strength she had found without him. He finally understood. This wasn't a test he could study for. It was a verdict on his soul. The 5 minutes Stephen Ardley had allotted stretched into a chasm of time, each second a stone dropping into a deep, silent well. Isabella stood with her father near the grand gilded entrance of the restaurant, a space designed for triumphant arrivals and glamorous departures. Tonight it felt like a liminal space between worlds, the threshold of a life she no longer knew. She kept her back to the dining room, focusing on the intricate patterns of the marble floor, refusing to give Marcus the satisfaction or the pain of seeing her watch him. Her father's hand was a warm, solid weight on her shoulder. The shock of the evening's revelations was a secondary tremor beneath the earthquake of her public humiliation. Her dad, her quiet, flannel-wearing, Ohio-dwelling dad, was Stephen Ardley of Ardley Holdings, a ghost, a titan, a man who bought and sold city blocks the way other people bought groceries. The knowledge was so immense, so reality-altering that her mind couldn't fully grasp it. All her life she had believed she was a simple girl from a simple family who had fallen in love with a man from a world of immense wealth and power. The irony was a bitter pill. She had been the one with the power all along and had never known it. "Are you all right?" Stephen's voice was low, meant only for her. She shook her head, not a negation, but an expression of pure, unadulterated confusion. "I don't know what I am," she whispered, the confession raw and honest. "Dad, why didn't you ever tell me?" His thumb gently rubbed her shoulder. "Because I never wanted you to be my daughter, the heiress. I wanted you to be Isabella Ardley, the brilliant, kind, adventurous woman who loves books and has a laugh that can light up a room. I wanted you to build your own life, find your own value. Fall in love with someone for who they were, not for what they could gain. I wanted you to be happy, Izzy, on your own terms." His voice was thick with regret. "It seems my plan to protect you from the poison of wealth only served to leave you defenseless against it from another direction. For that, I am truly sorry." Her own world of quiet academic achievement, of simple romance, suddenly felt like a carefully curated garden she had mistaken for the whole world. And now the walls had come down. She looked at her reflection in the polished brass of the door handle. The woman staring back was pale. Her eyes red-rimmed her emerald dress defiled by a dark, ugly stain. But for the first time, she didn't see an imposter. She saw a survivor. Meanwhile, at the table, Marcus Sterling sat paralyzed in the eye of the hurricane. The silence left by Stephen and Isabella's departure was more damning than any accusation. It was a void, a vacuum where his life used to be. Opposite him, his mother's face was a grotesque mask of fury. Her perfect coiffure seemed to bristle with rage, her skin stretched taut over her cheekbones. The public humiliation had shattered her composure, and what lay beneath was terrifying. Well, she hissed her voice, a venomous whisper that cut through the silence. "Are you just going to sit there after what that builder just did to us?" "To me." He humiliated Chloe. He fired a loyal manager. He spoke to me as if I were some common piece of trash. Marcus stared at the water glass in front of him, at the condensation tracing a path down its side. It was the only thing his brain could focus on. "He owns the building, Mother. I don't care if he owns the moon." Beatrice spat, slamming her palm lightly on the table, the sound making him jump. "He is a nobody." "Ardley. The name means nothing. There is no heritage, no breeding. He is new money, the most vulgar kind. And his daughter is a conniving, manipulative little shrew who has clearly played us all for fools." Marcus slowly lifted his head, and for the first time in his life, he looked at his mother and saw not a powerful matriarch, but a frightened, bitter woman in a gilded cage of her own making. Her entire world was built on a fragile foundation of names, clubs, and perceptions, and a man she'd never heard of had just demolished it with a piece of paper. "Don't you call her that?" He said, his voice quiet but firm. It felt strange in his own ears, like a muscle he'd never used before. Beatrice laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Oh, so the little puppet has found its voice. Let me be perfectly clear, Marcus. You will stand up. You will walk over to that man and his pregnant whore, and you will inform them that you are a Sterling. You will tell them that we will not be intimidated. Your father will have this man's businesses audited, investigated, and ruined by the time we are done with him. You will leave that girl tonight, and we will begin annulment proceedings in the morning. A paternity test will be mandatory." Every word was a command. Every word was an echo of the voice that had dictated his choices, his thoughts, his entire existence. But tonight it sounded different. It sounded hollow, desperate. He finally stood up, his legs unsteady. "No." The word, so small, so simple, landed with the force of a physical blow. Beatrice stared at him, her mouth agape. "What did you say to me?" "I said no," Marcus repeated, and this time his voice was stronger. He felt a lifetime of suppressed resentment, of quiet frustration, bubble to the surface, not as rage, but as a profound, sorrowful clarity. "No more. You will not speak about my wife that way, ever again. You will not threaten her father, and you will not dictate the terms of my life. Not any more." "Your life," she shrieked, her voice rising as she too got to her feet. "I gave you your life, this suit, this partnership, this world. It's all because of me. You would be nothing without your family, without the Sterling name." "What good is the name?" Marcus asked the question, seeming to come from a place deep inside him. he didn't know existed if it costs me my soul. Tonight, I watched you and Chloe systematically destroy a person I love. Not for any reason other than your own cruelty and sport. You accused her of being a gold-digger mother when her father could buy our entire family 100 times over and not even notice. You called her a liar and a cheat. You did it all with a smile on your face, and I sat there. I let you. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture frantic, desperate. That's on me. That is my unforgivable sin. But I will not make another mistake. I will not choose this. I will not choose you. The finality in his tone seemed to finally penetrate her rage. A flicker of panic entered her eyes. Don't be a fool, Marcus. This is a tantrum. You'll come to your senses. You are my son. I was your son, he said, his voice breaking with the grief of it. But tonight, I have to try and become a husband and a father. And I can't do that and be your son at the same time. The two are incompatible. He turned his back on her. He could hear her gasp, a sound of utter wounded disbelief. He knew in that moment that a door had closed forever. There would be no going back. His trust fund would be frozen. His partnership revoked, his name spoken like a curse in the circles he once called home. The life he had known was over. He began the long walk across the restaurant. It was a gauntlet of whispers and stares. He saw the pity in some eyes, the scorn in others. He was no longer Marcus Sterling, the golden heir. He was a spectacle, a man stripped bare in the most public way imaginable. With every step he shed a layer of his old self, the privilege, the entitlement, the weakness. By the time he reached the entrance, he felt raw, exposed, and more himself than he had ever been. He stopped a few feet from Isabella, not daring to presume he had the right to stand beside her. He saw the strength in her posture, a resilience he had never appreciated, because he had never been forced to test his own. Isabella, he said, his voice a ragged whisper. She turned, her beautiful face a canvas of pain and guarded strength. He could see the love he had cherished, but it was now behind a wall of hurt so high, he wasn't sure he could ever climb it. She's gone, he said, the words catching in his throat. I told her she was wrong. I told her that you and our baby are my family. My only family. He took a shaky breath, the confession costing him everything. She said I was no longer her son, and I told her she was right. That man, her son, he doesn't exist anymore. He looked down at his own trembling hands, then forced himself to meet her gaze. Izzy, I know the words "I'm sorry" are meaningless right now. They're an insult to the pain I caused you. So I won't just say them. I'll say this. I am ashamed. I am ashamed of my silence, of my cowardice. I am ashamed that I valued my mother's approval more than your dignity. I was so afraid of her disappointment that I let her break your heart, and in doing so I broke my own. Tears streamed down his face, now hot and unashamed. I married you thinking I was giving you this grand life, that I was the one with the powerful family. I was so arrogant, so blind. All you ever wanted was my love and my protection, and I failed you on the most fundamental level. I don't deserve you. I know that. He took one hesitant step closer. But Stephen, your father, he gave me a choice between that life and a new one, with you. I choose you, Isabella. I choose our child. If you will let me, I want to spend every remaining second of my life trying to earn back the privilege of being your husband. He laid his plan bare, not as a bargain, but as a penance. I will call my father first thing in the morning and resign from the firm. I'll put our brownstone on the market. I will sell every stock, liquidate every bond, and sever every financial tie I have to my parents. I want nothing from them. The life we build, it will be ours, made with my own 2 hands. We can go anywhere. Vermont, Oregon, back to Ohio, whatever you want. I will follow you anywhere and do anything to prove that my love for you is the only thing I have left that's real. Isabella listened, her expression unchanging. Her heart felt like a battlefield, warring factions of love, betrayal, pity, and rage clashing within her. The man she saw before her was the man she had always hoped he could be, but he had only appeared after the original Marcus had let her be crucified. Could she trust this new version? Or was he just a man reacting to a seismic shift in power, now clinging to her because her family was stronger? The doubt was a poison she couldn't purge. She didn't answer him. Instead, she turned to the solid, unwavering presence beside her. "Can we go home?" "Dad." The simple question held all the complexity of their situation. Home was not the brownstone she shared with Marcus. It was a sanctuary he was not yet permitted to enter. Stephen nodded his face, a mask of calm authority. "Of course, sweetheart." He then looked at Marcus, his gaze level and analytical, like a judge considering a plea for mercy. "My apartment is just a few blocks from here. Isabella and the baby will be staying with me." Indefinitely. He paused, letting the boundary be clearly drawn. "You may walk with us, but you will not pressure her. You will not push her for an answer she is not ready to give. You will give her the space and the time she needs to heal from the wounds that you, by your inaction, inflicted upon her. Your journey back to her side begins tonight, Marcus. But the road is long, and you will walk it entirely on her terms. You will walk behind us. Is that understood?" It wasn't a question. It was a command. But for Marcus, it was a lifeline. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. But it wasn't exile. It was a chance. Yes, he breathed a wave of profound, humbling relief washing over him. "I understand. Thank you." They walked out of Aurelia together, but separate. Stephen led the way, his arm securely around his daughter, a silent protector. Isabella walked beside him, her head held high, looking straight ahead into the cool night air that felt like a baptism. And a few paces behind them, trailing like a penitent, walked Marcus. The deed Stephen Ardley had carried in his pocket that night had done more than transfer ownership of a building. It had served as the founding document for a new life. A life where Isabella's worth was absolute. A life where Marcus, stripped of his name and his fortune, would have to build a new identity from the rubble of the old, all for the hope of one day being worthy of the woman walking ahead of him in the darkness. Isabella's story is a powerful reminder that a person's true value is never determined by their bank account, their family name, or the opinions of cruel and arrogant people. It's measured by their integrity, their strength, and their capacity for kindness. In the end, it wasn't the billionaire's power that saved her. It was the love of a father who saw his daughter's true worth, and a woman who found the strength to stand up for herself, even when she felt most alone. Marcus now faces the long road of earning back trust, proving that true wealth isn't inherited, it's built through character and action. If this story of justice and empowerment resonated with you, please show your support by hitting that like button. It truly helps our channel grow. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, share it with someone who might need to be reminded of their own inner strength. Most importantly, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story of drama, revenge, and ultimate triumph. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What do you think Marcus should do to truly earn Isabella's forgiveness? Thank you for listening.